Welcome back to Katana TCG. In this week's video, we're looking at some old cards that have some new tricks because of Lost Origin. That's right, we're going to take a new perspective on some of the cards that might not have seen so much playability in the previous Astral Radiance format that might have a new life with Lost Origin. So let's go ahead and check them out. When it's time to flex on your opponents in Top Cut this season, or even just upgrade your TCG accessories, make sure you're checking out inkgaming.com. They have a wide variety of custom playmats, custom dice bags, face masks, as well as mouse pads too, and a grip of sleeves and dice and deck boxes, all your TCG accessory needs. And you can use the code DADSPOD10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order from inkgaming.com. Your game, your style. Alright, to start this off, we're going to look at something just mildly unorthodox in the form of Ditto Vmax. For 3 colorless, the max transform attack allows you to use one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks, and that's pretty cool. With things like Goodra and Giratina around right now, being able to, for 3 colorless, hit that 280 mark very comfortably is pretty sick, because in exchange, the Giratinas are not actually able to deal a one-hit knockout back to Mr. Ditto Vmax, and with the Ditto V's V transformation, we could basically switch in and out of Arceus and Ditto as we see fit, putting us in pretty advantageous positions, which is kind of cool, but in order for us to not get swung back into for massive damage, we've also included things like the Radiant Gardevoir. All of our Pokemon take 20 less damage from our opponent's Pokemon V's attacks, which is pretty neat, and if you combo that with the Lake Acuity, you're actually able to take 40 less if we have the water energy attached, and we do run the Melanie featuring water energy engine on this Ditto, so there is a world where Ditto could potentially get a one-up on things like Goodra and Giratina because of its max transform attack, plus the defensive capabilities that were included in Lost Origin. Next card we're taking a look at that gets a little bit of a buff from the Comfy Chorus Lost Zone engine is Leafeon Vstar. Doesn't necessarily have the most practical attack in the form of 2 grass and 1 colorless. It does Leaf Guard for 180, and then it takes 30 less damage from your opponent's Pokemon's attacks the following turn, which is neat because it gets you out of that 290 threshold. However, it's really in the deck specifically for the Ivysaur ability, which is an ability-based gust. You can use it once per game, but as long as your opponent doesn't have something like Fusion Strike energy attached to them, you are able to gust them into the active to knock them out with things like Regidrago. And we're playing this Regidrago out of a Regi box, if you will, because of its attack for 2 grass and 1 fire. It does Dragon Energy for 240 damage, plus Choice Belt. You can get that up to 270, which is basically the threshold for all of the V-Star Pokemon in the format. Because it does need a fire energy to satisfy its attack, we do have to run the energy specifically, which means we can also combo in things like Radiant Charizard to be able to hit that 250 with its Combustion Blast, and if your opponent has taken prizes, this attack gets less expensive. So it's a really cool box, and I really think that you would have a lot of fun playing something like this, and it's just definitely different and brings a new light to Leafeon Vstar. And since we're on the discussion of Leafeon, we are going to talk about how it's been featured in the Giratina list as of recent. Giratina, because it does need a grass, a psychic, plus a colorless to do Shred or Lost Impact or Star Requiem, it's neat to be able to advance a grass energy from the deck with Greening Cells. If you have the opening hand attachment to Giratina, whether it be psychic, grass, or your capture energy, Greening Cells can definitely give you in advance on getting that extra attachment you need to use Shred or use Lost Impact the following turn. And because Leafeon Vstar actually does have a pretty handy V-Star power, you're able to basically gust turn 2, get your early game Lost Impact to set your opponent at a mild disadvantage. And because we do use the Comfy Chorus engine, you can actually use Leafeon V or Vstar as an attacker, because we do run a handy amount of grass energy to be able to perform it. And we're not quite done talking about Giratina. This is a list that my teammate Richard played on locals, and I really like the inclusion of this amazing rare card that we might not have seen play otherwise if it weren't for things like the Lost Zone engine and Mirage Gate. It's amazing sword attack, very similar to Giratina, uses 1 grass, 1 psychic, but you also need 1 metal to do amazing sword, and it does 150 plus damage. And if your opponent has any VMAX Pokemon in play, it does an additional 150 damage. This is substantial. This is a great single prize attacker that you can easily power up with Mirage Gate, and with the addition of Choice Belt, you're actually able to hit 330 damage, which takes a one-hit knockout on Kyurem Vmax. A very cool tech, very cool feature, and it's really, really neat to see the amazing rares getting a new life with the Mirage Gate. And there are other amazing rares that are seeing a little bit of play because of the Mirage Gate as well, in the form of Reshiram for 1 fire, 1 lightning, and 1 dark. You do Amazing Blaze for 270 damage, and unfortunately does 60 damage to itself, but as a single prize attacker, this thing hits like a brick. We're able to bump that attack up to 280 perfectly with the flare symbol Moltres that came out in Pokemon Go, which is also a very cool inclusion in this deck. Because we're running so much fire energy, we can also run Radiant Charizard. Your opponent's realistically only taking 1 prize at a time if they don't gust this spicy Lumineon that I like to have in this deck to be able to search out the Chorus. It makes for a very, very slow game for your opponent, but you're able to take multiple prizes between things like Reshiram and Radiant Charizard very handily, with things like Choice Belt, Magma Basin to accelerate onto those fire Pokemon. Just makes it wildly consistent on top of being able to use Mirage Gate very efficiently. So we'll step out of the realm of the Lost Zone for just a second here and talk about Shadow Rider Calyrex featuring this new Clefairy. The Moonwatching Party ability is pretty cool. When you have it in the active spot, you can search your deck for a Psychic Energy and flood it into play onto your benched Clefairies. This is a really cool feature, and its Wonderstorm attack for 3 colorless allows you to do 20 times the amount of Psychic Energy that's in play, and that's not just attached to Clefairy, so it's a little bit better than Lunatone in that aspect. And between things like Shadow Rider Calyrex to be able to hit those big numbers and accelerate energy into play and help you draw cards, we also feature Radiant Greninja, where you turn discarding energy into draw support. We also run a Pumpkaboo because Path to the Peak will be very problematic for a deck like this. However, the addition of Clefairy into Shadow Rider just makes it that much stronger, and you're able to trade out a very solid and nimble single prize attacker in that fashion. And if you don't like Psychic Pokemon, then why don't you try using Umbreon inside of Zoroark Vstar? Its Moonlight Blade attack is kind of neat. For 1 dark and 2 colorless, it does 80 plus damage, and if this Pokemon has any damage counters on it, this attack does 80 more damage. Between things like Gengar putting itself onto the field and putting 3 damage counters on it, and Damage Pump being able to spread those damage counters around, you can turn Umbreon into a pretty solid attacker, if you will. The energy acceleration is still a little bit up in the air, but we do have things like Raihan, and we get to feature something like Piers to be able to grab our Umbreons as we see fit, plus the double turbo energy, which is something Zoroark has definitely been running into just a little bit. But my favorite part about this is not necessarily the ability to hit for dark weakness, but you have ability based research in the form of Phantom Star in this deck, and we also have ability based gusting in the form of Dark Signal on Umbreon Vmax, which makes it very easy to forego the idea of using multiple supporters for the turn when your abilities built into the Pokemon basically got you, and that's super sick. So what about Eternitus? Well, it got gold dark patches. That's really all you needed to know. Other than that, it got a free retreat Pokemon in the form of Hisuian Sneasler. It is dark type, so that we are able to utilize the Eternal Zone ability pretty handily. Other than that, the addition of Lost City can help you keep things like Galarian Zapdos off of the field, and anything else that proves to be problematic for Eternitus definitely gets pushed down with something like Lost City, and using that to bounce Path to the Peak, which isn't as heavily used as it used to be, makes Eternitus a pretty substantial attacker. Now, you still need to be very weary of things like Avery, because that's definitely a bummer for a deck like this. However, you do get a pretty good attacker if you need to follow up the following turn in Galarian Moltres, and Clara will help you get things like Galarian Zigzagoon back to help you widen that bench once again. And of course, I have to talk about Rapid Strike Urshifu. It got a lot of cool partner Pokemon in the form of Drapion V, which has the Wild Style ability, and this attack costs 1 colorless less for each of your opponent's Single Strike, Fusion Strike, and Rapid Strike Pokemon in play. Its Dynamic Tail attack for 4 colorless deals 190 damage, which is perfect for Genesect, and it does 60 damage to itself. Because it is a dark Pokemon, it does 1-hit knockout Mew VMAX, which is pretty cool. And we use the Thornton supporter to be able to switch into it multiple times, so that we can basically just take 2 Mew VMAX and call it a day. But using things like the Sableye to put 12 damage counters on the field to set up things for snipe damage multi-prize knockouts is pretty sweet as well. And in a deck like this that runs the Mirage Gate, because of the Lost Zone engine, we can actually effectively attack with Radiant Greninja, which is like a baby Gmax Rapid Flow in itself. So there are a lot of courses of action in this deck, and I've had a lot of fun playing it. It unfortunately has a terrible Goodra matchup, but we'll see how the meta shakes out. And last but certainly not least, we have Mew Vmax. It's running things like Marnie and Avery now to disrupt your opponent's board state as well as their hands, so they can't really build a line of play to effectively win against Mew Vmax. You can also feature things like the Lost City Stadium to keep things like Radiant Charizard off of the field for good, and you can also run a one-of Drapion to win the Mew Vmax mirror and switch in and out of it from the discard pile with Thornton, and that is pretty effective if I do say so myself. So Mew stays pretty good, and it kind of enters a new realm of play altogether. I hope you enjoyed this Old Dogs New Tricks video. It doesn't feature the most meta relevant lists in the world, however they seem super playable and it looks like a lot of fun. The standard format just brings a lot of variety to the field, and I'm super excited to try a lot of these out. If you enjoy my content, make sure you like the video, shoot me some comments below, and subscribe to my channel and turn those notifications on so you get an alert every time I post something new on my YouTube. And make sure you're listening to the Pokédads podcast every Friday, where we release episodes talking about all things Pokemon all the time. I'm going to go ahead and head out. Deuces.